Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider live reaction edition to the NCAA baseball tournament bracket reveal that happened a couple of hours ago. I'm Zach Ewing with our advocate baseball beat writer Koki Riley. And Koki, we've been talking about it for months. We played 57 games. We didn't play. LSU has played 57 games, and it has led up to this. They have accomplished goal number one, and that is to get a top 8 national seed.
Yeah, absolutely. And they got in as the number 6 team. And there wasn't a whole ton of drama today, despite it being a selection show. And I think LSU, if you look at the teams that they were paired up with overall, they got a pretty good draw. They faced Little Rock, which is a team that, just went 8-16 in their own conference, but just happened to win the conference championship. So they're in as the 4 seed. The 3 seeds, Rhode Island, who is they're in the top. I just pulled it up here, but they're in the top 70 in RPI. They're 68th in RPI. They went 22-8 in the Atlantic 10. But if you compared to, say, other potential 3 seeds you could have gotten, that's a decent draw for LSU. And then Dallas Baptist is the 2 seed, which is kind of interesting because LSU's already played them. They played them in Dallas. LSU won the game 7-3, and it'll be really interesting to see what the rematch sort of looks like over in Baton Rouge. So LSU got a really good draw, and there's a decent chance they won't have to play an SEC team in the Super Regionals if they get through this regional, because Clemson is the team that they're paired with. And it's Clemson, Kentucky, SC Upstate, and for whatever reason, I'm blanking on the 2 seed.
West Virginia.
West Virginia. West Virginia, a team that won a lot of games, but haven't really played anybody this year. So it's a really, really good draw from all sides if you're an LSU fan.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you look at this and say LSU should make it to Omaha with this draw. That does not mean that they will.
Yeah.
But they get the number 6 national seed, as you said. They have talked all year about, I don't know that Jay Johnson came out and said this specifically, but does it matter if you're 4 or you're 6 or you're 8 or you're 2? I don't think it matters. I think they just want it to be in the top 8, be seeded to play at home, meaning, if they keep winning these games, they're going to be at the box for every game they play until the College World Series. So that's the goal. And then, as you said, after that, it's kind of luck of the draw. And I would say LSU got pretty lucky with this draw. Again, that doesn't mean that there's not one of these teams that can't beat them. Like, if you look at some of the numbers, Rhode Island is a team that can hit. Dallas Baptist is a team that can hit. Obviously Clemson's a very good team. It's not that they can't win these games or can't lose these games, but LSU will be favored in every game that it plays. And obviously double elimination, that means you would have to be upset twice at home. And it's interesting. My other takeaway, Koki, I was kind of doing some research. LSU has barely played any of the teams it might play. I mean, LSU is a obviously very historic college baseball program, especially over the last 40 years or so. And they played a lot of different teams in postseason runs. They have never played a single one of these teams either in their regional or in the super regional in the postseason. In fact, they've barely played any of them at all. You mentioned they played DBU earlier this year. That was the first time LSU and Dallas Baptist ever played. And they played one series against Little Rock like 10 years ago. Every other team they've played, with the exception of Kentucky, who's in the Clemson regional. Obviously, they've played Kentucky a lot, but all of the other 7 teams, they have never played them in the postseason. They obviously played Kentucky in the Super Regional 2 years ago, but they've never even played Clemson ever as a baseball program, which is shocking.
Yeah, that's really weird. Not a lot of history with SC Upstate, I hear, I guess.
No. I mean, well, some of them are like, why would LSU ever play South Carolina Upstate or West Virginia or Rhode Island?
Yeah.
Surprises me. Dallas Baptist, kind of an up-and-coming program over the last, 10 years. LSU had not played them before this year. You mentioned they played one game up in Arlington. And then, like a team like West Virginia, they've been around a long time, but LSU's never played them. Clemson obviously has had a lot of baseball success, not as much as LSU, but they've had some. It's just crazy to me that those 2 programs have never met. So that'll be interesting if that is the matchup.
Yeah, that'll be interesting if that really is the matchup. But Clemson has a slightly tougher draw to have to face an SEC team and to have to face West Virginia, which was like they were kind of like far and away had like the best record in the Big 12, but the problem was that like they had the easiest schedule in the Big 12, and they just didn't really have a lot of tough competition this year, West Virginia. So it's kind of hard to gauge actually how good they really are.
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky, we know that they're tested. They went to Tennessee and won a series at Tennessee. Like they're no pushover. Like they could come back here and LSU could play them in a super regional for the second time in 3 years. It's not impossible. But Clemson is the favorite. And LSU should definitely be the favorite in their own regional. Like you said, Rhode Island can hit, but they're only 68th in RPI. Like it's not some daunting potential 3 seed. Like for example, like Kentucky's like in the 30s in RPI, and they're the 3 seed in that regional. So Dallas Baptist is definitely a challenge. I mean, LSU fans got a good look at them over in Arlington. They got a lot of power on that team. Pitching wise, I think LSU can get to them, and we kind of saw that in that game in Arlington. And part of that's because Dallas Baptist wasn't using their weekend arms from a starting perspective, but they saw a lot of their relievers, and it'll be interesting to see how that sort of shakes out in this regional. And then with Little Rock, like they got maybe the weakest team in the field. No offense to Little Rock. I mean, 32 of
the record. Yeah, right.
They're 243rd in RPI. That team usually that team doesn't get in, but if you win your conference tournament, you're in. So, LSU got as good of a draw as they could have possibly asked for here.
Yeah, if this were basketball, Little Rock would have been in one of the first 4 games, like on Tuesday or Wednesday in Dayton. That's the caliber team you're looking at, and that doesn't mean that they can't do it. And one more point I'll bring up about the overall draw. I think what you wanted to avoid was, as you said, like you weren't going to get an SEC team in your regional, but you didn't really want a power conference team in that regional. LSU didn't get one. A team that has seen your caliber of pitching week in and week out. DBU has played a reasonably good schedule, so it's not like they haven't seen it. They're the one team that
they have one of the better non-major conference teams, but they're not the best. They're not even the best major conference team. Well, non-major conference. Well, I mean, technically that's Southern Miss and Coastal Carolina, who they were never going to face in a regional anyway. But like, I don't know. Like they're probably in the top 5, but they're not 1 or 2.
Right, and they're not a power conference team, so they haven't played the same kind of schedule LSU has. And then if you even zoom out to the super regional. Again, Kentucky is an SEC team. That's a tough team. Clemson's going to be a tough team. Like you're going to face somebody good in the super regional, but neither of those teams, I think, scares you to the point where, like, if LSU and Georgia had been swapped and Georgia had been the 6, LSU's the 7, Georgia may have to play Ole Miss in its super regional. To me, that's a lot tougher. LSU just lost to Ole Miss in this SEC tournament. That would have been a tougher draw. Again, no one's sitting here saying LSU is going to breeze through this, but I'm with Alan. Like I don't know. It's hard to say you should win it easily. It's the postseason, but this is as good of a draw as you could hope for. And to Joe's point, they have to hit the ball unlike they did against Ole Miss, but they're not facing that caliber of pitching.
No, they're not.
Let's dig into these regional teams just for a minute. Like you mentioned Little Rock, they play them at 2:30 on Friday. This is a team that got hot for one weekend. They won the Ohio Valley Conference tournament. This would be just a midweek appetizer for LSU normally.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and we can talk about this in a minute, Koki, but like the interesting thing is, what will LSU's pitching decision be against Little Rock? Because you could make sure you win that game and throw out Cade Anderson or Anthony Ianson, or you could maybe save those guys and think you could beat Little Rock with another guy. You'd be rolling the dice a little bit. We'll see what Jay Johnson does. The other two I want to talk about real quick, DBU and Rhode Island, they're both team batting averages over 300. Rhode Island's 309, DBU's 304. DBU is one of the better teams in the country in like strikeouts per 9 from its staff. They're 16th in the country in that. They're 18th in the country in doubles, 8th in the country in fielding percentage, tied for 11th in the country with 6 shutouts from their staff. Like DBU is a well-rounded team, and I think, and Rhode Island can hit. Like a lot of their offensive numbers are good. In fact, they're 6th in the nation in runs scored. Again, against a softer schedule. But I would consider DBU the biggest threat simply because they have played competition, LSU itself, but also teams similar to LSU throughout the season, much more so than either Little Rock or Rhode Island.
Yeah, they absolutely railroaded Oklahoma in one of the midweek games before the start of conference play. Like, they do a pretty good job of trying to schedule as many tough opponents as possible to sort of like boost up their RPI and their resume, despite the fact that they're not in a major conference. So they're a challenge. Like, I don't want to pretend that like it's going to be some sort of breeze for LSU to get through this regional. I mean, as we saw, like that was still a pretty competitive game that they played over there in Arlington. I think LSU only scored 7 runs in that game. It felt like they should have scored more. They kept on putting. It was a weird game where they put tons of guys on. Both teams honestly hit the ball really hard, and yet there was only 10 runs total to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's going to be a really, really interesting regional, and just really ready for these games to start. And as for who they're going to pitch against Little Rock in that first game, if you're LSU, I mean, I think we got to go back to 2023 and the decision to pitch Paul Skeens against a 15-win Tulane team, and he threw a complete game. And they won. They won fairly easily, and they moved on to the next round. And my guess is that they're going to throw Anderson or Ianson in that game, just because I don't think Jay wants to screw around, even if it is against maybe the weakest team in the field.
Yeah, I mean, the only argument that I would make there is that Little Rock is significantly weaker even than Tulane was 2 years ago. Like you really could probably throw out whoever you want against Little Rock, not whoever you want, but like whether it's a Shores or a Newt or choose one of those kind of 3rd to 4th starter types and probably beat Little Rock. However, the other factor here, and the reason I tend to agree with you, is that if you do that and you're saying, okay, we're saving Anderson and Ianson for Saturday and Sunday for either Rhode Island or DBU and trying to win those 2 games, then they're off schedule for the next weekend. And some of the super regionals are Thursday through Saturday. And if you do that, you kind of don't have those guys available in case you draw a Thursday super regional. And then you've got to do the same thing and you risk falling behind in your super regional. So I think big picture, just don't get too cute. Leave it as it is. I do think if you're up, 8-0 after 5 innings, maybe you think about pulling a Cade Anderson after, let's say he's at 70, 75 pitches, and then maybe you could bring him back for a couple of innings for a Monday finish if you needed it in an elimination game. Like I think maybe that's on the table, but I think just not using them at all seems too risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're going to be more aggressive with your pitching anyway, but there's no need to cut down on rest and all that sort of jazz when it comes to the next weekend for the super regional. So you got to be smart about these things at the same time.
Yeah. And I'm like, you also have to remember, hey, Dallas Baptist is tough. We really need to have Ianson for Dallas Baptist. First of all, if seeds hold, you're going to play Dallas Baptist on Saturday, and you will have Anthony Ianson for that game anyway.
Yeah.
Second of all, by the time you would get to a regional final type game on Sunday or Monday, like Rhode Island and DBU are also going to be down to their 4th and 5th starters at that point. So it's not like oh my gosh, we have to save one of our top 2 guys for a regional final. No, you don't. Like if you're LSU and you're Jay Johnson, I think they realize we're still a better team than these teams are. We can still hit their pitching too. I just,
and there's also more depth within LSU staff this year than there has been in past years too. Like, I mean, I think Jay knew it would be perfectly fine to throw in that 3rd game. I really do. And I mean, he looked solid in 4 innings against Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. He retired 16 straight the week before against South Carolina. And you look at a guy like Jacob Myers, for example. Like, this is a guy who didn't even pitch the weekend before the SEC tournament, and then he comes out there throwing 101 miles an hour with ride, and he's commanding all 3 of his pitches. If you can get that guy going, then all of a sudden, I don't know, they just have so many different options, and they didn't even use Cowan or Evans this past week. So apparently today they're throwing a bullpen. That's what Jay said. So it'll be interesting to see how they deploy those guys, because you can just start Evans in that 3rd game. Like, you have options and you have pitching depth, so use it. I guess that's the best way to to say that. And make sure you win that first game, because that's a huge advantage. Make sure you win that second game, because that's an even bigger advantage, because you still have 2 cracks at it. Yeah. Even if you lose the third game, you have a crack at a fourth game,
And you're playing a team that would have had already to play 4 games by the time they get back to the regional final, if you can win those first 2 games. So exactly. LSU will be a huge favorite against Little Rock on Friday. They, and we'll still again have one of their top 2 guys to throw at Dallas Baptist or Rhode Island on Saturday. If you win that game, you're in great shape. And again, maybe you pull Anderson or Ianson a little bit early if you have a big lead in one of those games, and you in case of emergency break glass, need to bring them back on Monday for a few innings, you could do that. I think LSU is holding the better hand, and they should play like they're holding the better hand here.
I agree.
And with the big picture in mind, again, Clemson's going to be tough. If Clemson spent time in the top 5 this year, like that is a good baseball team.
Yeah.
And so if that's the super regional, that's how it comes out.
That still seems like a better matchup than Florida State, where you would have probably had to go up against like Jamie Arnold, or Ole Miss, or even Tennessee, where like you don't want to face an SEC team in that super. So like
again, you're going to face somebody good in the super. So if you had to choose, I mean, obviously maybe, I want to face Coastal Carolina, or
Coastal Carolina is a really good team.
Yeah, but they're all good.
They were almost a top 8 seed.
Right. Southern Miss. I mean, like these are good teams. So you can't sit here and say, I'd rather face this team or that team. Like you're going to face somebody good. So Clemson, again, it's interesting. It's fresh. When I looked that up in the LSU media guide, I was just convinced. In fact, I'm still not is it a typo? They've never played Clemson before.
It is bizarre. Yeah. I mean, LSU and Clemson, to the football, if we take the football aspect of this too, like these programs could get very comfortable with each other over the next few months.
I was just about to say our buddy Scott Rabelais is, I don't know how many hundreds of times he's mentioned on this podcast that LSU and Michigan have never played in football. I guess LSU Clemson is the baseball version of that. Like you're like, how have those 2 teams never played? But they've never played. And LSU's never played Rhode Island, and they've never played West Virginia. So there's a lot of matchups out there that will be the first time, and they've only played Dallas Baptist the one time, only Little Rock 3 times. They swept the series from them. I'm going to look that up. What year was that they swept the series from Little Rock? It was 2005. So we're even looking at quite a long time ago for that.
That's Smoke Laval era. Yeah,
crazy. The only team in this little pod of 8 teams that LSU could play in the regional or super regional that they are at all familiar with is Kentucky, and that's the team obviously they beat in the supers on the way to the College World Series 2 years ago, and they did not play them this year, so it wouldn't be familiar in that aspect. But it's kind of a fresh bracket, and I kind of like that for LSU.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's as good of a draw as you could have possibly asked for. I really do believe that. And it's like Vanderbilt got the number 1 overall seed. And I don't think they got as good of a draw as LSU did. So I think that kind of goes to show like being the number 1 overall seed really doesn't matter that much. It's about, the luck of the draw and being a top 8. It's about being a top 8 seed, and check mark that, right? They earned that. And then B, after that, then it's just the luck of the draw. And they got a good draw here. They got a really, really good draw here.
I agree. So you mentioned Vandy. Let's go to a big picture look at this NCAA baseball bracket. Vandy's the number 1 seed. SEC gets 6 of the top 8 national seeds. In fact, they got 6 of the top 7. Because number 8 seed was Oregon State. They were the only other non-SEC team in the top 7 is North Carolina at number 5. And then you add in a couple of other national seeds. Ole Miss is 10th, Tennessee's 14th. SEC had 13 teams overall. I thought it was funny when they showed the map of the regional hosts at the beginning of the selection show. It was like, you had UCLA, Oregon, and Oregon State over here. And then you had this cluster of 13 teams in the Southeast, where you count Austin as the Southeast. We're being a little bit rough with our definition there, but from Austin to like Tallahassee and up to like Clemson and Conway, South Carolina. And I guess Chapel Hill would be the farthest north, but that section. And by the way, there are like thunderstorms all week in the Southeast, so get ready for a whole bunch of. I hate to say that. I'll knock on. Maybe we'll get lucky, but like, it's just this time of year. There's gonna be there's going to be some long nights and some long delays and things like that. And hopefully that won't be the case at the box. But LSU scheduled to play at 2:00 on Friday. Did you have any big picture takeaways? The SEC obviously always cleans up in this exercise in seeding and how they do. And they seem to be set up well to do it again.
Yeah, no surprises here. Just total domination from this conference. Like you said, 6 of the top 7 seeds. Vanderbilt being the number 1 because they went on that run in the SEC tournament while also playing really well toward the end of the regular season, and also being the top team in RPI. So they earned it through their play toward the end of the season. If you combine it, especially when you combine that with the metrics. So, Texas is off to kind of had a much slower ending to the season. Tennessee and Ole Miss worked their way into being hosts. There was a point where it looked like there was only going to be 6 SEC hosts, and they were all going to be in the top 8. Then Ole Miss and Tennessee went on a little run in the SEC tournament, and that was enough for those 2 teams to get into the hosting discussion. So, like you said, like 6 of the top 7, 8 of the top 16. It's domination, just absolutely dominating. I mean, we're probably gonna have at least 4 teams that make it to Omaha from the SEC. LSU is maybe as well positioned as anybody to be one of those teams because of the way the bracket has fallen for them. So yeah, it's really, really interesting draw overall, and we'll see.
Yeah,
So,
I might even go as far. I was going to ask you how many SEC teams to ultimately make Omaha in your estimation. I might even go one up and say 5.
yeah, I said at least 4.
Yeah,
I'd have to
because
look
you're going to have.
I can pull. Well, we can pull up the whole bracket and do the exercise if you want to do that right now. But I would say at least 4, even without looking at the bracket.
Yeah, we let me see if we can pull up the bracket, because this is interesting. If we can pull it up.
Oh, on the actual show.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. Let me see if I can do this. And bear with me if this doesn't work.
Great podcasting
correctly.
Look,
we're doing this live, baby. Here, let's see if we can do this.
There we go.
Okay,
hey, there it is.
So, top left. Mm-hmm. You got to expect Vandy to come out of that. And I mean, like, if you look
Louisville did beat them during the regular season, though.
If you look at these 8 teams, yeah, okay. I mean, Louisville's tough, but you're playing in Nashville. As you mentioned, Auburn playing really well right now. If you look at these 8 teams, who's the biggest threat to Vandy not making Omaha? It might be Alabama. It might be another SEC.
Alabama. Yeah, I mean, I think I liked Alabama from what I saw from them during that series here in Baton Rouge, where they have 3 or 4 really good hitters and the starting pitching to definitely potentially win a super regional. They got a couple solid relievers too. I mean, they're not a perfect team by any means, but I mean, they were like 13th in RPI at the end of the year for a reason. So they're probably the greatest threat to Vanderbilt, but again, that's not that easy of a draw for them. Like, Southern Miss is a good team, and I mean, LSU lost to them 3 years ago in a regional over in Hattiesburg, and then Vanderbilt literally lost to Louisville this season. So, like, it's not a guarantee that Vanderbilt gets out of it, even though the number 1 overall seed. And it kind of goes to show just how up in the air this tournament is this year. Like, usually the number 1 overall seed is the team to beat. And like, Vanderbilt is the best. Yes, they deserve to be the number 1 team, but they're not necessarily the greatest team, So,
I really think you could have taken those top 7 teams, kind of thrown them in a hat and just picked one, and like, that team might pick 2 of them, and either team could beat the other equally. So I agree with you, but I do think, pretty good draw for Vandy. Again, yes, they lost the game to Louisville. It's not a gimme.
Miami's not that easy either. So.
But I'm going to go ahead and say an SEC team, either Vandy or maybe Alabama, gets out of this group of 8 teams.
That's fair. Yeah.
The way over here
right now, if the Vandy team that we've seen the last week or two, if that team continues into next week and this week and next week, then yeah, they're going to get out. But like, a slight slippage could be a big problem for them, because that's how slimmer the margins are even for the number 1 overall team.
Okay, over here on the right side with these 8 teams, we'll scroll just a little bit. Texas is the 2 seed. They're seeded to get through. I think this might be your sort of breaking point between, are there 4 SEC teams or 5? And the reason I say that is because, like, Texas is not playing that great, Koki, and UCLA is a team with a lot of experience. They played a pretty difficult schedule. I think Texas should make it. UC Irvine's another good team. Texas should make it, but I don't think they're a gimme at all.
Yeah. It's interesting with UTSA in that regional with Texas, because I just looked this up real quick, but they played them during the regular season and they lost to them in 12 innings at home.
I think that was their first loss. Wasn't that right before they played LSU?
That might have been. I got the schedule up here. Yeah, you're right. That is exact. That was their second loss of the season. They lost to Louisville to open up the season, which is another point towards Louisville. Louisville's beaten Vanderbilt and Texas, the top two seeds in this tournament. But they lost to UTSA. That was just before the LSU series, which is kind of interesting. So and they're in their regional. That's not easy as a 2 when they literally beat them already. Then Kansas State, LSU saw Kansas State earlier that team can hit. So it's not a suit again. I would take LSU's regional in terms of the opponents they face than what Vanderbilt and what Texas got. Yeah. Just based on the teams that those two teams based on the teams that they were drawn up against. Right. And like Kansas State gave LSU more of a fight than even Dallas Baptist did, I thought. And when they played on that same week, so even East Tennessee over the Vanderbilt side, the East Tennessee gave Tennessee their first loss of the season, so it's not impossible.
Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed.
These are interesting teams. I'm not saying they're favorites, but they're interesting teams.
Sure. So make your pick. Does Texas ultimately make it through this group of 8 and get to Omaha?
I'd say so. Maybe my alma mater has something to say about that. Arizona State
Sun Devils down there, yeah.
Yeah, they snuck in as the 3. UCLA's a solid team. UC Irvine was in hosting contention for a while there too. So, but I'd lean Texas, but it's not a slam dunk.
All right. So let's move on to the next section.
I lean Vanderbilt, but it's not a slam dunk.
Right. Next section here. This one's interesting because over on the left side here with the Tallahassee and Corvallis.
Scroll up a little bit. I think you have that cut off with North.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to. You know what? Let's do this. Let's take this off.
Oh, okay.
Better. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, there we go.
That's better. Okay. So in this group of 8 between Tallahassee and Corvallis, the only SEC team is Mississippi State. So I think this is the section least likely to produce an SEC team in Omaha. But what do you think?
Yeah, that's a tough draw for Florida State, though, because Mississippi State is a team that was really hot towards the end of the year in the SEC. Granted that their schedule did lighten up in the second half but they have been playing much better baseball. And then Northeastern's a team that's literally won 27 straight games. They have a team ERA under 3. They've been really, really good this season. And then Florida State they're a good team. But I think Jamie Arnold, they have a big decision to make with Jamie Arnold. They have an even tougher decision, right? Because I think they can probably beat Bethune-Cookman without him. And do you want to save him for Northeastern Mississippi State, which is you're going to need a guy like that to feel really good about winning one of those games. So,
but again, then you could be messing up your super regional rotation.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe that's okay. Maybe Jamie Arnold pitches game 2 of the super instead of game 1. I mean, he's still going to pitch once. So.
Yeah. And then, but Oregon State they're a top 8 seed for a reason, and you have to, and you're going to have to go all the way to Corvallis for that. And that's not going to be easy. So I think I'm leaning Oregon State here. I think TCU was another team that was nearly a host. So they're going to be really tough. I just think Oregon State having that home field advantage is huge. And that's a really talented team. They're kind of turned into the Notre Dame of college baseball because they don't have a conference anymore. So.
I was just about to say, what a fascinating season. They lost their conference, played an independent schedule, and still wound up with a national seed, which is quite an accomplishment. Obviously it's a team with national championship pedigree, but quite an accomplishment for the Beavers. So
they deserved it. Yeah, they deserved it.
I like that pick. Other side, this group of 8, and if this is one where if seeds hold, you're going to have SEC versus SEC in the super regional. And so that would be 3 SEC teams in Omaha. Do you see anybody else challenging Georgia or Ole Miss here?
I think Georgia Tech could, just because, if you saw the selection show, they were not happy at the fact that they weren't granted a host because they won the ACC regular season title and they still weren't a host because of a lot of it has to do with scheduling, because their strength of schedule was not very tough this year within conference. And the committee definitely had that as a major factor into the reason why they're here as a 2. So you could see an angry Georgia Tech team go into Oxford and win the regional. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I still lean Ole Miss here because of how well they played toward the back half of the season. It's going to be really hard to beat Georgia at Georgia. Georgia has notoriously been really, really good at home this season. But if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Ole Miss. So my guess it's one of those 2 teams. But Georgia Tech and Duke are 2 pretty good teams. Georgia Tech literally won the ACC regular season title.
Bring me Georgia Tech Super, man. Bring me some good old fashioned hate in the Super Regional.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. That would be really crazy.
All right, our third kind of these are not going to be the matchups in the College World Series, but just because this is how the bracket's laid out here. Going to the left side here, Chapel Hill Regional and Eugene. This is the one where, again, just one SEC team in that group of 8, so not likely to get another one. I think our count is 3, though. We've got Texas Vandy and either Georgia or Ole Miss. So that would be 3. Probably not going to get Oklahoma here, although Oklahoma, LSU saw them. They've got some pitching. They could compete, but North Carolina got to be the favorite, especially you look at who they'd be matched up with. Any of these teams, Oregon, Arizona, Cal Poly, would have to travel across the entire country to play North Carolina in the Super Regional.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a scary team, it might actually be Nebraska in that Chapel Hill Regional just because they just won the Big Ten tournament. And, I mean, LSU saw them. They can hit a little bit. I think their pitching seemed to be a little bit better. Their pitching didn't seem fantastic when LSU saw them over in Frisco. But given the way that they're playing, and I'm pretty sure they held UCLA to a shutout en route to winning that Big Ten championship. That could be interesting for UNC. I think UNC should be the favorite given how well they've played toward the end of the season. Like they've been on a roll toward the end of the year. And as we saw last year, I mean, it's hard not to have a lot of respect for that program and the amount of talent that they have, even without a guy like Vince Honeycutt, for example. I lean UNC to get out of that regional. I think Arizona could win the Eugene regional. I mean, they have to travel a little bit, but they're used to going up the Eugene back as old Pac-12 teammates. And Arizona, I mean, they won the Big 12 tournament. They probably would have been a host if their RPI wasn't as low as it was. And Cal Poly's kind of interesting too because they beat Texas A&M twice. I think it's still going to be UNC, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's Arizona. Like if the 2's going to get out, Arizona has a pretty decent chance of getting to a super regional at the very least, maybe even creating chaos after that.
Yeah, there'll be surprise teams, no doubt about it. We talked about the group of 8 on the right side here. I think we both expect LSU to make it through.
Yeah, I think LSU should be a pretty heavy favorite. I feel better about them than maybe any other SEC team. Okay. I know that sounds like, like you cover LSU, of course, but if you look at the regional, they already beat the 2 seed. The 3 seed is barely in the top 70 in RPI, and the 4 seed might be the weakest team. So that's the regional. Then in the super regional, you're facing a Clemson team that's been okay to end their ACC slate, but not amazing. A West Virginia team that's a little unproven, but interesting. They're kind of more TBD than anything else. Then Kentucky, which snuck in, but. Yeah, if Kentucky gets hot and they win that regional, then they're scarier, right? Yeah. But if that doesn't happen, then if anything, you're feeling pretty good if you're LSU heading into that super.
All right, so that would be 4 SEC teams if you're keeping track. Going down to the bottom here, you've got Auburn as the number 4 national seed. That was, going back to the beginning of the season, people would have been surprised to see that, but the Tigers had a great season. Yeah. The other super regional, Coastal Carolina, the host. East Carolina, a team that's no stranger to playing deep into June, and then the Florida Gators.
Yeah, this is not great if you're Auburn because I think they should be a pretty good heavy favorite in their own regional. Like NC State's no pushover, obviously, but that's more roughly your average 2 seed, I guess. A team like NC State, like Stetson, had their conference championship game rained out. So they kind of had a bit of a raw deal there, but they still sneak into the tournament anyway. So you got them. against, but like Coastal. The problem for Auburn is the potential super regional against Coastal Carolina, a team that some people thought had a good enough of a resume to be a top 8 seed, or Florida, who they've been excellent to end the season, right? After starting the year 1-11 in SEC play, like you don't want to face those SEC teams in the super, and they're in a spot where that could very well be the case. So, I mean, being at home is going to help them a lot here, but it's not going to be easy. And I think if I'm a betting man, I would say an SEC team gets out just because 2 of the top 3 favorites in that regional, even if they're all pretty close, are SEC teams. So,
I mean, so that would be 5 if we're, I mean, again, some of these are not for sure. Like I think Texas and Vandy are kind of iffy. Ole Miss and Georgia, could Georgia Tech come out of that? Like this is one of those deals where probably not all 6 are going to make it out, but just going through this exercise, I think there is a chance that you have 6 SEC teams in Omaha. And of course, there's 6 national seeds. So that would be just according to seed. Coming to the last kind of quadrant of 8 here, Tennessee, the 14 seed defending national champion. Obviously, someone's going to have to knock them out. And boy, what a super regional matchup. Arkansas cannot be super happy with that.
Yeah.
You could have Arkansas, Tennessee in the supers.
And Arkansas didn't get the easiest draw. Creighton had a very good finish their season in the Big East. And Kansas was one of the best teams in the Big 12 all year. So it's not super easy. It's not the hardest draw they could have gotten, but it's and then there's North Dakota State as well, which is a team that LSU is pretty familiar with the last 2 seasons. So I think Arkansas should be the favorite coming out of that. But we said that last year, and then Kansas State beat them. So it's not impossible. And you look at the Knoxville Regional. I think Tennessee should be a pretty solid favorite there. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for me to see any of those teams, putting runs up on the board against Liam Doyle or Marcus Phillips. They have a really interesting decision to make, whether they're going to use one of those 2 guys against Miami of Ohio and save them for Wake Forest and Cincinnati. Wake Forest, we know about their pitching. It's one of the best pitching programs in the country. Offensively, do they have enough to win that regional? I kind of doubt it. So I think you're going to get an SEC team out of that regional, out of that pair either way, whether it's Tennessee or Arkansas. And a Tennessee-Arkansas super would be very, very entertaining.
Yeah, no doubt. They just played a couple weeks ago in Fayetteville, so they could rematch in the supers with everything on the line. So if we go back and look, I mean, again, the SEC's got 6 national seeds, so shouldn't be too crazy to say, but I mean, you could easily see a pathway pretty much all the spots except for this one, Tallahassee, Corvallis, where it would have to be Mississippi State, and the one below it, Chapel Hill, Eugene, where it would have to be Oklahoma. Those 2 seem very unlikely to produce SEC teams. The other 6, I tell you, I mean, I don't know if the favorite in all of them is an SEC team, but it's pretty darn close.
We'll get at least 4 and maybe 5.
Yeah,
because
I'd say between 4 and 6. Yeah,
6 would mean. I wouldn't say it would take a lot for 6 to happen, but like everything, somebody would fight for the conference. You know what I mean? So
you'd have to have
some good teams out there. So like I don't know, but like I think 5 is a good number.
But in a lot of those quadrants, like even if a team gets upset, it might be another SEC team doing the upsetting. So
that's true.
You could end up with a Florida or a Tennessee or somebody in instead of the national seeds. So very interesting stuff. LSU again, they will get going on Friday at 2. They'll be followed by Rhode Island versus Dallas Baptist at 6:30 Friday night, weather permitting, please. Weather permit. And then let me see the Saturday games. The times are TBD, but I believe there'll be three games Saturday. Is that right? You'll have the elimination game, the game between the 2 1-0s, and then a game at night between 2 1-1 teams, and that will produce your regional final on Sunday. Or maybe the 1-1.
No, just two Saturday, 2 Sunday. The Monday would be the TBD because
the game between the 2 1-1 teams would be early Sunday, and the winner of that would face the 2-0 team Sunday evening, and then if necessary, you play again Monday. So fun stuff. We will have some post-game shows for you out at the box this weekend here on the LSU Sports Insider. But until then, thank you for joining us. He's Koki Riley. I'm Zach Ewing, and this has been the LSU Insider.